In the rolling farmlands of York County, Pennsylvania, a tranquil afternoon hid something far darker. It was September 17, 2025, when detectives from Northern York County Regional Police arrived at a farmhouse on Haar Road in North Codorus Township. They were there to serve warrants on a young man named Matthew James Ruth, just 24 years old, accused of stalking and trespassing. What they didn't know was that Ruth was already inside, waiting, armed, and prepared. For weeks, Ruth had been obsessed with his ex-girlfriend. He prowled around her home late at night, sometimes dressed in camouflage, sometimes lurking with binoculars in hand. In August, her pickup truck mysteriously went up in flames. She feared him deeply, and not without reason. Just the night before the ambush, a trail camera captured Ruth outside her house with what looked like a scoped rifle. Authorities knew he was becoming more dangerous. Warrants were drawn up for criminal trespass, stalking, and loitering. But by the time officers arrived to serve them, Ruth had already set the stage for something much worse. His ex-girlfriend and her mother had fled the home that morning, locking the doors behind them. Hours later, when detectives arrived, they noticed the door unlocked. It seemed strange, but not alarming enough to stop them. What they didn't know was that Ruth had slipped inside and positioned himself, waiting for them to enter. He was armed with an AR-style rifle fitted with a suppressor, the kind of weapon that makes violence swift and deadly. As the first detectives stepped through the door, the silence shattered. Bullets exploded from Ruth's weapon, ripping into the entryway. In seconds, 3 officers fell. Detective Sergeant Cody Becker, Detective Mark Baker, and Detective Isaiah Emmenheiser. These men, fathers, husbands, protectors of their community, were killed instantly in the ambush. Outside, the chaos spilled into the yard. 2 more officers, a Northern York detective and a York County deputy, were struck and critically wounded. Yet even in the chaos, one wounded detective fought to save his colleagues, administering aid first to those inside, then to the deputy outside. The gunfire echoed through the quiet farmland. Other officers returned fire as Ruth continued his assault. When the shooting finally stopped, Ruth was dead. Police would later describe the scene as nothing less than a calculated ambush. Inside, investigators found shell casings littered across the floor and, in the basement, the body of the ex-girlfriend's black Labrador, shot and killed by Ruth before the officers even arrived. It was a chilling detail that showed just how far his cruelty reached. In the days that followed, Pennsylvania mourned. Vigils were held. Flags flew at half-staff. The names of Becker, Baker, and Emmenheiser were spoken with reverence. These were men who had dedicated their lives to protecting others. Now, their own lives had been stolen in an instant. The 2 wounded officers remained in critical condition, fighting to survive. For their families, the wait for updates became its own kind of torture. Investigators pieced together the final hours before the ambush. Ruth had been spotted outside the house with binoculars, armed and ready. He had returned that morning, slipped inside, and deliberately unlocked the door to lure police into a fatal trap. His fixation on his ex-girlfriend, his stalking, his threats, none of it had been random. It had been building. And while officers acted quickly to respond to the danger, Ruth was already steps ahead. He had planned for violence, and he carried it out with ruthless precision. The tragedy raised haunting questions. How many warnings had there been? Could more have been done after the truck fire, or after the surveillance footage showed him armed outside the home? And how do you prepare for someone lying in wait, ready to ambush anyone who walks through the door? For the people of York County, the farmhouse on Haar Road will never look the same. It isn't just a home anymore. It's the site where 3 detectives were murdered in the line of duty, and where 2 more nearly lost their lives. It's a reminder that the dangers officers face don't always come from dark alleys or city streets. Sometimes, they wait in the quiet of rural Pennsylvania. As the community grieves, one truth remains clear. This was not just a tragedy for law enforcement. It was a tragedy for everyone. A mother and daughter who had already lived in fear are now left with the knowledge that others died protecting them. Families of the fallen must learn to live with loss, and a police department must carry on, forever changed. Detective Sergeant Cody Becker, Detective Mark Baker, Detective Isaiah Emmenheiser. Their names will not be forgotten. They were more than uniforms. They were sons, fathers, brothers, friends. And though their lives ended in a single violent moment, their service, their courage, and their sacrifice will be remembered far longer. This was the ambush in North Codorus Township, a carefully laid trap that left 3 officers dead, 2 critically wounded, and a community broken. A story that reminds us that danger can wait anywhere, and that even in the quietest corners of Pennsylvania, the echoes of violence can change everything in an instant. Click the like button, comment below, and follow.